ready? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third of our What Are We Learning About Positive Youth Development series. Today we are going to highlight two programs, one from Mozambique and another one from El Salvador. But before I go into more details, a little housekeeping. Please, if you are on the phone, please mute your lines. The lines are going to be muted. And anyway, but we encourage you to use the chat box to send us questions. After each of the presentations, we are gonna give some time for you to ask the presenter clarifying questions about the program that you just heard. And at the end of the webinar, we are also gonna have a Q&A session. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time or don't know about YouthPower, YouthPower is a USAID funding mechanism that strengthens local, national, and global systems to achieve sustainable, positive youth outcomes in health, education, and political and economic empowerment. And the project consists of two complementary agency-wide IDQs, YouthPower implementation and YouthPower evidence and evaluation. The YouthPower implementation focuses on the design and implementation of positive youth programming and policies, the capacity strengthening of youth service organizations, and the promotion of increased youth engagement in development efforts. And the YouthPower evidence and evaluation focuses on research and evaluation of youth programming, assessments to inform program design, and the dissemination of knowledge in the field of positive youth development. Next slide, please. Also, if just a quick refresher, positive youth development is an approach that really uses or recognizes that all youth have assets, and the approach provides the possibility of those young people to utilize their assets, what we call agency, in to contribute to their own betterment or to change or to create positive changes in their community in a very supportive environment. Next slide. So today, did I introduce myself? I don't remember, sorry. Sorry about that. My name is Olga Merchant. I am the Youth and Workforce Development Advisor at USAID. And today we're gonna have three speakers. We're going to have Angela Alejo and Christy Brady from YouthPower Action, and they're going to be talking about a program that they have in Mozambique. And what we call the YouthPower Action Mozambique is a short-term project that builds on an initiative that was designed 7 years ago to strengthen the community-based response to HIV/AIDS in 7 provinces in Mozambique. And they focus primarily with orphans and vulnerable children. And the second project that we are gonna highlight today is in El Salvador, and it's called the Bridges Through Employment project. And this project is a 5-year USAID-funded activity that has been or is being implemented by Development Alternative. And Lisa Kaplan will be talking about the program today. The goal of the Bridge program is to increase and improve employment in targeted high-growth sector for at-risk youth living in selected high-crime rates municipality. And they use a holistic approach to capacity building and provide the young people with the soft skills, training, technical training, and entrepreneurial capacity. And they also work very closely with the private sector. So again, before I give the phone to Angela and Christy, I want you to remind you that you will have the chance to ask them questions after their presentation. So without further ado, please welcome Angela. Sorry. Angela and Kristen. Oh, sorry. And before, actually, I give the phone to them. Their presentation, we asked them pretty much to cover some questions that they are gonna cover during the presentation. And so one of them was for them to tell us how they are implemented positive youth development, to talk about 3 benefits that they have found because they have using the positive youth development approach. Also 3 challenges while implemented the positive youth development approach, and also they are going to provide recommendations for other partners to use in the future about using positive youth development approach. So please help me welcome Angela and Christine. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Olga. My name is Angela Leshu. We're going to present about the implementation of YouthPower Mozambique. YouthPower Mozambique had 2 phases. I'm going to talk about the first phase, and Christian is going to talk about the second phase. So during the first phase of implementation, it was a 9-month program. We then had an extension of additional 3 months, so it became a 12-month program, whereby our objective was to strengthen the capacities of the families in the communities and care about the orphans and vulnerable children using the positive youth development lens. Within this program, we reached about 21,397 OVCs with services that were kind of holistic services to the OVCs. Our target group was from 10 to 18 years old. So this phase 1 had 4 components. We expected to reach the 4 results. One of the results was to increase the understanding of adolescent development. I'm going to talk more about these 4 phases in the next PowerPoint. The second was to increase opportunities for the youth to voice themselves and inform decision making about the available services for the youth in their communities. And the third objective or result was to increase access to saving and loans and also financial literacy for the target group, which was 10 to 18. And then the fourth expected result was to increase the community-based services and also improve the outcomes and their life, their quality of life. So in the first component, which was our first result, we actually going to talk about, we're going to point out some of the features that we implemented using the positive youth development in this phase. So initially we did a training of trainers to the CSOs, facilitators or supervisors, and also we trained community health workers on the adolescent development because this component was very new to Mozambique. So we had to give them tools so that they could also provide a cascade training to the community health workers. So these community health workers are the ones who were implementing the project at the community level. By so doing, we created life skills curricula based on debates and also discussions, and also created safe space and opportunity for the youth belonging. This curricula included adolescent development, the GBV, the nutrition, the sexual reproductive health, drugs, alcohol, stigma, discrimination, and bullying. And so from this experience, we thought that using the positive youth development, the features that we identified for this particular project was providing them with skills, providing safe spaces. The youth they had opportunities to feel that they belonged to this project, and also with them with health relations and bonding. And contributions, because they also contributed to their communities. In result too, we had a lot of activities, because since youth took the lead on participating or in their communities, we had them leading the mapping exercise, where they went to the community and mapped all the services available to the youth in their communities and produced a directory. We also had them leading the health fair, so they took the lead in sensitizing people to participate. They worked with the government institutions like health to promote the fair, and they were like they belonged. The fair belonged to them, so they were taking the lead on this, promoting the health fair. They also participated in the community child protection groups, because it was part of the project to ensure that 30% of these committees were composed of youth. So we created committees and ensured that youth also took part of this community and participating by telling the community what their problems, the committees what their problems were, and also trying to find solutions to solve their problems within their communities. They also participated in the youth scorecard activity. I'm going to talk much about this in the following slides. In result 3, which was more related to economic strengthening, we created saving and loans groups. Some groups were composed of adults and where youth participated, and in some provinces we had groups only composed of youth. In many cases, when people come to us and when we talk about this activity, people ask us where did they used to get money to participate on the loans, because since they are vulnerable children, they didn't have income. But what we sensitized them was to make them sell fruits during their out of school, sell fruits, and then with those money they could save them in the saving and loans groups. And we also supported them to have financial literacy so that they could easily manage their group. So we linked these adolescents to the adults sponsored to mentor youth and provide them enhanced relationships with adults. Some of the youth even started small businesses, and those who were head of families could support their families with their small business. So this was one of the good things that came out from this project. In result 4, we're actually providing services to the offices. We help them to access the 7 services. These are the services that were actually recommended by the Minister of Social Welfare. So we had to ensure that our youth could access all the services that were provided to them. So we created screening tool for adolescents to build positive youth development concepts and also help the community health workers to identify youth at risk. We also promoted teen mothers participation in mother-to-mother groups. Of course, we had some challenges in this, but because some of them were very young and they didn't want to be part of the elder mothers group, but with some sensitization, we managed to encourage them. We also support the school enrollment and third groups. We created third groups in collaboration with some of the school teachers, and we actually had to sensitize the parents to leave their children to participate in the study group. And as a result of this, we saw that many youth who were participating in the study group improved their school performances. This was based on their teachers' results. So we also provided nutrition services and supported the youth to secure documentation, because most of them are vulnerable. Some of them did not have documentation to go to school. So we had to get poverty certification through the Ministry of Social Welfare and ensure that they are enrolled back to school. Some of them, because we are working with health workers, the community workers, they could identify those youth who needed psychosocial support, and this was one of the activities that our health workers provided direct. So they provided psychosocial support to those who needed the support. And basically this is what we did in YouthPower Phase 1, and I'm going to hand over this to Christian so that she can talk of the second phase, and maybe she will talk of the challenges and the benefits that we found in the positive youth development, because it's all part of the same program.
Thank you, Angela, and this is Kristen Bray with FHI 360, and I'm the Project Director for YouthPower Action. YouthPower Action is a buy-in mechanism, so we have a number of different activities, and in our work with Mozambique, our first phase was to focus on this broad OVC program that reached a large scale in a very short time period, so it was very broad and very intensive. In the second phase, in fiscal year 18, we focused on one intervention. And this is an intervention we've been doing for many years in Mozambique. It's a program that began over a decade ago, working in Brazil. When we first started the program was focused on youth employability, primarily with at-risk youth with a strong IT focus. When we moved the methodology to Mozambique, we're working within an OVC context, and we added a lot more focus on health behaviors, and we took what was a youth employability program to be much more integrated and holistic. So we're looking at healthy behaviors, employability, reinforcing education, and engaging youth in their community. So we ended up with a very broad positive youth development approach. A lot of the things we've added these PYD elements over time. So it has been a gradual growth to increasingly integrate more PYD elements. A lot of the things, we just started this phase in October. So some of the results we'll talk about will be activities and results we've had over a longer time period of time. Our target age group is OVCs ages 15 to 17. So the primary aspect, most significant aspect of our program is focusing on holistic skills and education. And as you'll see, the skills focused on the left-hand side of the column, there is a broad range of skills, and we implement those skills using a project-based learning approach. And the project-based learning is particularly important because it's particularly effective in building soft skills, in building critical thinking, teamwork, social skills, communication skills, and we see very significant changes in self-esteem. So it has been able to build some of those key soft or social emotional skills that are really important for youth across multiple domains of their life. The program goes for 4.5 months. It's a very intensive program. They're in the program 5 days a week for 4 hours a day. And following this classroom period, they go on to a 2 to 3 month internship, or some of them go on to vocational training. So they get to then apply what they've learned in an employability setting. a major aspect of the methodology is making sure that they have access to positive relationships. The first aspect of that is that we focus heavily on the learning facilitators, since they're with the youth every single day. We prioritize how those facilitators work and respect young people in our selection. We train a larger number of facilitators than we actually need to hire for several weeks, and we watch how they work with young people before we hire them, because we know how they're being treated is particularly important for how youth will succeed in the program. Next, we provide young people with a mentor, and we do this through an e-mentoring approach. The focus of the mentoring is to provide the young people with access to a professional who can give them career guidance, help them think about career paths and decisions, give them advice on their CV, while at the same time giving them another trusted adult. One of the things in terms of parents, we've always had an outreach with parents to help sure they understand the program, what's going on, how they can support that young person as they go through this program. But this past year, we added a parent support groups so that we could work with parents and help them understand adolescence, help them how to better understand adolescence. And this has been particularly important. It's something the youth asked for. They said, can you help us with our relationships with the parents? And one of the things we found in phase one was a very significant, when we worked with parents in phase one, parents kind of came to this understanding as, wow, I didn't realize my job as a parent was to support and to communicate with my young person. I thought my job was to police my child. So parents really were struggling with, how do I parent an adolescent? So these parent support groups enabled parents to talk about what some of their challenges were and get feedback with other parents and with our community health workers who tried to give them guidance. And we recently did focus groups with the parents, and they talked about how they have they better know how to communicate with their young people. They have more respect. They see them in a more positive light. And we've seen a lot of changes in terms of the parent-youth relationship. We've also involved the young people to talk to the parents. So we bring different youth and their parents to come, and they do role-play activities with their parents because they can share and tell the parents what it's like to be a young person. The relationships between young people in the classroom is very important. The project-based learning, they work in teams, so they have to learn how to work with each other. And one of the very first things we do is we learn how to provide positive, constructive feedback. And by learning that early on and that becoming a strong social norm, young people treat each other well in the classroom, and that's just part of the ethos in terms of how they relate to each other. And in our follow-up studies, and looking at the young people over a period of time, we found that the youth maintained very strong friendships with their friends from PPF. We also have a social worker who's part of our staff, and the social worker can identify young people who are having problems, that we see behavioral issues. And we'll reach out to the families to try to understand what some of those behavioral issues are and identify if they need someone to talk to and if they need any additional support. In terms of youth contribution, this happens in a very simple, constant daily basis because youth, the project-based learning methodology, requires youth to make decisions about how they're going to go about a learning activity. So they're doing voice and choice every single day as they implement their programs. They are very active in their own learning, so they're doing their own decision-making in that. And we also involve the young people in decision-making about the program. So anytime we're going to do something that affects the young people, they're involved in that decision-making. We also engage youth, identify peers in the community, and they invite those peers to come to a session on Saturdays. And at those Saturday sessions, the young people replicate the learning projects they did earlier in the week with the young people from the community. And so we've expanded our base. We let other peers know about the program. And the PPF youth feel very strongly that they are role models for their community. And it's had a really significant impact on how they see themselves and the importance and role that they need to have with others. When young people finish the program, we found for a while that they go through this very intense 7-month period, and all of a sudden their activity's done. But they really want to stay connected, and they wanted to do more. So we created youth clubs that provide an opportunity for youth to carry out activities that they think are important. So in the youth clubs, some of them provide IT training to other youth in the community. Some of them do community outreach in their schools to have discussions about healthy behaviors and other types of community service. We also engaged youth to do a youth-led labor market mapping so that they could help understand employers' needs. And we use this information to inform our curriculum design, as well as for youth to better understand what the needs are and that the employers are facing and what might help them find a job. Some of the other PYD features relate to belonging. Within the curriculum, we have activities that address discrimination and stigma and bullying, and as OVC youth, many of whom have lost a parent to HIV/AIDS, they face a lot of stigma and discrimination. So it's really helpful for them to be able to share their feelings and understand how they can address this. And they talk about this with their peers, and we have activities to help them address some of these issues. Early in the program, we create a code of conduct with the youth and the facilitators. They all decide on what is appropriate rules, what's a safe and respectful environment, and they make decisions together about what are the consequences if we're not following some of that code of conduct. So that creates a safe environment, and it also creates positive social norms that everybody follows, and they all kind of integrate those kinds of behaviors from the code of conduct. Another really important aspect is that, as we talked earlier about the facilitators and how they treat the youth with a high level of respect, they have high expectations, and they constantly are putting questions back to the young people and giving the young people a feeling of trust and confidence so they can take risks to make a mistake. And that risk-taking is really important to their learning process. And then finally, the other PYD element that we integrate is very traditional in an OVC project, where we're helping link youth to other services. So we do this through household visits. The community health workers go to the household, identify services they need. For example, early on, we found that a lot of youth weren't in school because they couldn't afford school fees or books. And we helped them get access to a poverty certificate, which meant that they could get a waiver for those school fees. And so we provide them greater access to services, and we do that linking families and youth to services and helping the families understand youth needs. Here's really quickly some high-level results. These are, as I said, these are results we've had over the years through the program, not necessarily through YouthPower Action, since we've only started this aspect of the program this year. One of the most significant things is that kids all want to continue schooling. In the province we work in, there's about a 5% completion rate for secondary education. The PPF youth, and we've tracked them over many years, are at close to 70% completion for secondary education. So that's quite remarkable for OVC youth. We track their employment. 70% are working a year after they've been in the program. And while there's a lot of that is informal sector, 25% are in the formal sector, which is particularly challenging in the environment, the Mozambican economy. We take intern supervisors, rate the PPF youth, and so we have fairly high levels of acceptance from those intern supervisors. In terms of the health behaviors, lower levels of early marriage and early parenthood than the broader population, and a very high understanding and strong beliefs about maintaining healthy lifestyles and about preventing gender-based violence. So high levels of understanding about prevention of HIV. A lot of you said they don't believe that young people should be having sex before they're 18, and they don't believe in using drugs and alcohol. So those are the things that we have reported from young people many years after they've been in the program. So back to the big questions. What are the benefits of PYD? I think our experience has been, it's been great. It's been working quite well. I think one of the most important things is that it's helping us focus on what's happening developmentally, and that we're providing really holistic supports. I think one of the things we found through both phase 1 and phase 2 is that it's one thing to support youth and have a youth focus program, but that only goes so far, and that you really have to reach out and looking at those influences on youth and those other kinds of external supports. So families, parents groups, community supports, norms, and policies. And we found that some of the things we had, for example, an initiative to address early marriage. And some of the parents were resisting the work on early marriage until the government took it on. So that we needed both youth, families, and policies and norms at the national level. I think we all feel that youth passion and commitment, that there is tremendous amount of energy, that once you give young people the right kind of environment, that they're going to bring all of their strengths to their work. And we found that over and over again. In terms of challenging, as Angela mentioned, there's very limited understanding of adolescence and very limited understanding of positive youth development. And I think one of the things we were struggling with, how do we help explain positive youth development in very simple and concrete terms, particularly when we have short periods of time to work with people. We also found we had in phase 1, we had short periods of time to work with the young people, and change takes time. But we also had our community health workers had very low levels of literacy and limited amount of time. And we were asking them to implement this life skills curriculum, and they had a hard time with the modules because the amount of reading they had to do to keep that up. So we had to simplify the modules just because this was the nature of the people who we were working with. And then we found, as we often found, that to do youth engagement requires really helping adults understand the benefits and how to support youth and youth engagement. And then finally, in terms of recommendations, for USAID, as you think in the future about how you want to take programs in the future, we know that we need to provide time to engage youth in the design of programs. And we also have to remember that when we engage youth, we lose some control. And we have to make sure that our programs are aware of that in terms of our indicators and our targets and our projected activities. We need to leave space for the youth to come up with some of their own initiatives. We all felt that we need to develop training programs on PYD, on adolescent development, for community members, parents, and teachers. And we looked hard for a good curriculum on parenting of adolescents, and we really haven't found it. We certainly haven't found it in Mozambique. And then linked to that is how can we, if we're working in a very small context, we know that in order to have this impact, to address the enabling environment, we have to go beyond our small project. So we have to be able to find opportunities to link to other projects and institutions and educate them on PD. And if they use a PYD impact, we're all going to be more successful. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Kristen and Angela. We have actually a couple of clarifying questions, and I encourage you to use the chat box and send us more questions. Kristen, when you were talking about the employment of the graduates, you mentioned that 25% of them were working in the formal sector. Someone wants to know whether was 25% of the total or 25% of the 70 who were working.
It's 25% of the total that we've been able to track over time. And so every year we do a survey to identify what youth are doing. So that's of the total.
Okay, great, thank you. And there was a question from Mike before that is for Angela.
About the psychosocial.
Yeah, Angela, can you speak a little bit more about the psychosocial supports?
Yes, because these children were most of them overseas, coming from some of them, their parents died of HIV and they were living with the caregivers. Some of them were depressed and some of them did not have self-esteem. So we provided psychosocial support to increase their self-esteem through the clubs, because we created youth clubs, and then during the youth club sections, they had opportunity to interact among themselves and also interact with the health community worker. And through these youth clubs, we supported them to increase their self-esteem. And we also worked with their parents and caregivers to improve the communication with the OVCs so that they could be fluent communication among them, among parents and also the OVCs. So these are the activities we used to do through the health clubs, and also when we find out that the child is very depressed, then we could start with individual sections to understand what is happening in his family. Then after that, we link him to the club so that he could easily communicate with other children within the club and also be open within the club. So that's one of the psychosocial support that we provided to them.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Again, remember we are going to have a session of Q&A at the end of the webinar. So just because of timing, I want to bring Lisa for her to talk about puentes. No, yes. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Have you got my slides up there?
I think that you have the capacity to move them too. But if you want us, we can also do it from here.
Okay, there you go. Welcome, thank you. My name is Lisa Kaplan, and I'm the Chief of PYD of the USAID Bridges to Employment Project, which we usually call Puentes. Puentes is just ending the second year of its 5 years, and I designed this this presentation mostly around the questions that were presented about PYD. But just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we do in Puentes, our objective is to engage youth to increase and improve their participation in the labor market. So we are focused on getting the youth prepared and then having them work. The youth in the project are from 16 to 29 years old. In El Salvador, youth is defined from 15 to 29, but it was decided that we should start at 16 because that's where the labor laws allow youth to begin working at least part-time from 16 to 18. We have 4 objectives for our youth. One, they can decide to continue their studies. In some cases, it's to finish high school, and in other cases, it could be for technical training or university training. The project supports the return to high school and also technical training, but we do not include university training in our project. As I said, we support the youth to be trained in a profession and a technical skill, to have access to a full-time formal employment, and also we work with them if they would like to become entrepreneurs. Before I get into this slide, which looks at the 4 steps that we go through, our virtuous circle as we call it, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the first month of the project, which we spent on 4 assessments, so that while the project was designed in advance, the idea was to look at these 4 assessments, to examine their results, and to change the project if we needed to, so that we were based in evidence. We did a policy assessment about laws and practices in the country, both nationally and by municipality. And we did a training center assessment to look at the challenges and strengths of the professional development centers in the country. We did a labor market assessment to look at the economic sectors that would provide the jobs for our youth, and we did a participatory youth assessment to look at the needs and the challenges facing the youth in the country. And if you look in the upper left-hand quadrant there, we say that we started with where the companies shared their hiring needs. We started with the companies rather than with the youth here because we wanted to be sure that there were jobs for our youth in the country and that we were going to focus jobs and focus training on what the actual needs of the companies were. Many companies said that all they needed were youth that would have life skills and soft skills and work skills. And then obviously others were more focused on some of the professional development skills in terms of the actual skill, the actual technical skills of the jobs. We found 4 areas or 4 economic sectors that we're focused on: IT, manufacturing, tourism, that includes waiting and bartending because of the business tourism in the country, and agribusiness. So with those needs, we turn to the right-hand sector of this chart where we say the alliance between businesses and training centers. So we want to make sure that the training centers are training youth for jobs. And if the businesses know that the training centers are actually churning out youth that will meet their needs, then the youth can be immediately hired. It was interesting for us because in the beginning, the training centers would tell us that their clients were youth, were their students, and they wanted to keep their students happy. And through our work, we have seen that we're trying to get the training centers to focus on their client being the company so that the youth can meet the needs that the companies have so that the youth can get employed. So we turn to the training in technical careers or in entrepreneurship. We also provide training in life skills and soft skills, and then we hope and help the youth to get employment. I'm going to jump right into the questions that were asked and give you an overview of some of the top things that we're working on in PYD. First and foremost for us is skill building. We have the training in life skills, in job readiness, as I mentioned, technical areas, and entrepreneurship. Let's focus a bit on what we're doing with life skills. We work with the government of El Salvador's Youth Institute, which is called INJUVE, and we use their curriculum. We are working to help them improve the curriculum, but for the sustainability of the project, we didn't want to create something new. We wanted to take what was already established and was being used in the country and work with them to make it better. What we're also trying to do is work with the training institutions so that it's not a separate, so that life skills training is not only a separate 60-hour module, but that the training in the technical fields can also include methodologies and approaches that would integrate life skills in the technical training itself. That's new for the country and new for INJUVE, the Youth Institute, and it will take us some time to train the instructors so that they don't use the old methods of memorization in training, but that they will incorporate some of the life skills training that we are promoting. Job readiness skills are something that we're also including in the life skills, and also self-employment. The technical areas right now are in the 4 economic sectors that I mentioned, and I would say that for us, the major focus has been in IT training. There are a number of jobs here available for front-end and programming, and it's been a boom for El Salvador. The second major area in technical training is for manufacturing, and plastics is actually a big topic here, and we hope that it will be environmentally safe plastics with recycling. Tutoring and mentoring is something that we're starting actually now in our second year. We've been doing job readiness tutoring and mentoring, especially for the entrepreneurs. Two focus areas I mentioned here for youth engagement. One is the participatory youth assessment. As I mentioned, we talked about that in our first year of the project, because we decided that we were going to create our activities around what the youth actually need. And the youth had a major component in the focus groups and the interviews for the participatory youth assessment, but we also included CSOs and NGOs and training centers and businesses to get a balanced view of what people think of youth employment in the country. Right now, we're working on a campaign, a media campaign, to help change the environment around youth in the country. There's a very negative stigma. And so right now we're carrying out focus groups and interviews so that we can begin the media campaign first with the baseline and then with advertisements, with billboards, with radio and television spots to help the environment improve. Community involvement is something that we're also working with municipalities, with community leaders and NGOs and CSOs, so that we help to improve the environment in which the youth live. I think jumping down to the environment of safe space, this for us is ultimately one of the biggest challenges we have, but we're working very closely with municipalities and community leaders and families and youth because of the security needs that our youth address every day. And we mentioned here vulnerable groups. We not only include youth in the most violent communities, as was mentioned in the introduction for Puentes, but we also work with the LGBTI communities, with young mothers, young parents, and with youth that have disabilities to train them and also help them get jobs. Also mentioned is here is private sector engagement. We wouldn't be doing anything if we didn't have businesses involved, and we're also working very closely with the business sectors, with the private companies to help them change their attitudes about youth. Right now in El Salvador, many communities are controlled by the gangs, and simply by the address that is on your identification card, youth are relegated to a category of being violent. So they are victims of where they live. Not all youth are gang members. Many youth are affected by the gangs controlling their communities. And this is something that the project cannot address, but we have to address the consequences of what happens in the communities with the gangs. 3 benefits for the project. Obviously, PYD has helped us understand much better the realities of the youth in the country and the realities facing the private sector. The private sector had said that they can't hire youth because the youth are not prepared, and the youth say that the private sector has demands upon them that are impossible for the youth to meet. So understanding these challenges has definitely helped the project in its development. Using PYD and getting youth involved in every stage of the project has helped us recruit youth for the project. Youth are very reluctant to participate because of trust, because they don't know the outsider when we go into their communities. And so getting them involved in decision making, getting them involved in at the very start, asking their opinions has helped us recruit more youth for the project. And as I said before, getting the youth involved and the media campaign will definitely contribute to the development of our messaging. 3 challenges implementing PYD was the next question that was asked. And as I said before, we have enormous security issues at the community level. We face these security issues ourselves when our staff goes into communities. We have to be sure that our security team on Puentes researches a community before we go in, so we know simple things like, should we put the logo on the car or not? What types of tennis shoes can we wear? Because if we wear Nikes, for example, they could be associated with a rival gang and put the staff at risk. So we're very careful with our staff when we go in. Do we wear our t-shirts that identify us as Puentes or not? Also, the security issues of our youth. When we bring youth together in a community center or a church or a school where we are recruiting, are we crossing borders? Are the youth entering a territory that is controlled by a rival gang from the community that they live in? Sometimes we have the same issues at training centers. Youth can't attend a training even if it's around the corner from their house because they would be passing through a community or a rival area, and then they couldn't carry out the training. Some of the communities are controlled by gangs that case the events that we attend and where we recruit youth, so that people know where others are. And so, some of our staff has even raised concerns that, okay, so we're training youth and we're getting them jobs, and then they're going to work, and now the gangs know who's working, and so those would be youth that could potentially be targeted to pay the monthly security fee, quote unquote. It's bribes that the gangs charge working people and business owners in order to protect them. So security is definitely a challenge for us every single day. Another challenge that we've faced implementing PYD is, I think we have changed the expectations of youth. And by involving them from the very start, they have high expectations that we will immediately be able to place them in a training center in an area that they would like to be trained in, and then that we would be able to find them jobs. Puentes does not generate jobs. We help youth and help connect them to businesses, but we're not a job creating project. So we definitely have the more involvement of youth, but we also have raised their expectations, and that's a challenge for us. And as I mentioned, while security issues in the community is a challenge for us and for the youth, it's also a challenge the private sector and society, because many people are afraid of young people. They automatically assume that they're gang related or they're connected to someone in the gang, and they don't want to train them or hire them. General challenges experienced not only with PYD, but overall, the project is challenged with finding full-time and formal positions for youth. Most of the jobs that are available are in the informal sector, where the people are not registered for government services, they don't pay taxes. But the project's goal is for economic growth, and we only seek and count full-time formal employment. As we said before, challenges with safe places for recruitment and training. And one thing that I didn't talk about, but that is that's one of the components of the project, is the local labor laws. And one of our challenges is having companies adhere and comply with local labor law. just to give you a couple of examples of the challenge, is that part of the training that we have is to have youth in practicum, in internships, and usually they're unpaid. And what will happen is an employer will give a youth an opportunity for practicum for 2 months, promising them a job, and at the end of their 2 months, they say goodbye, and then they look at another free youth who can serve in their practicum. So the youth are providing free services and free work, and the local labor law actually for internships and practicums is now under review, and Fuentes is helping to draft some of the legislation to help youth in practicums. 3 key recommendations. I think for us in Fuentes, economic growth is key. As I said, we are not a project that generates employment, but we're located under USAID's Division of Economic Growth. And without economic growth and without new jobs in the country, there are no positions for young people. And one of the things that we don't want to do is to train our youth and then have them not be able to find employment in El Salvador and then migrate or immigrate either from their communities to the capital of San Salvador or leaving El Salvador altogether. So economic growth is definitely key to a youth training project. Something that was also mentioned in the other presentation is training the others, training of the private sector and training of CSOs, which is something that Fuentes is doing, but also could be something that precedes a project like ours, because right now we're doing them at the same time. We're training youth to have new skills, and we're also trying to train the private sector. And as was mentioned before, change is slow. And so by the time we get this private sector on board, the youth are already frustrated because they can't find a job. And the third recommendation is obviously to continue life skills mentoring and tutoring. I think that we have the life skills that are presented in, I'm looking at this document here, the key soft skills for cross-sectoral youth outcomes that YouthPower did, but we also want to make sure that we've got mentoring and tutoring included. Future recommendations for the design of youth projects, youth programs, as was also mentioned before, ensure that youth are involved in decision making. And I think one of the things that Fuentes did was to have the participatory youth assessment first, and that helped us design activities to come. To strengthen the national and local youth-focused organizations, which is something that Fuentes has taken on since we worked on the policy assessment and since we worked on the participatory youth assessment. We realized that the organizations that exist definitely need work, need help. And the last recommendation that we have is something that we're starting more in our 3rd year of the project, is more emphasis on entrepreneurial training. And technical training is prominent in the country, but I think there's a lot that can be done in entrepreneurial training. What we're trying to focus on is the 4 economic sectors that we mentioned, to get away from the numerous small businesses that youth have in baking bread and in seed jewelry and small employment, like small businesses like that, to try to get the young people to establish small businesses in the 4 sectors that we were mentioning: IT, agro-industry, manufacturing, and tourism. There's a question here about PYA report and or database. I don't know if that one's for me, but I just wanted to close by saying that we focused on those 4 questions that that were asked, but there are a lot of other activities that Puentes is working on, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. We do have a couple of questions that we have received while you were doing your presentation. So we're going to use the next few minutes to address those questions. And again, remember, we are going to have a Q&A session just for general sessions for all three presenters. So, Lisa, could you tell us a little bit more about how you are selecting the youth to participate in the Puentes program?
Sure. Puentes is designed to work in 15 municipalities in the country. The first months of implementation, we, together with USAID, created a criteria for selection of these municipalities. Principally, USAID wanted us to work on a place-based approach where USAID El Salvador had other projects in the country. That was one of the criteria. Another criteria was to focus on the municipalities that are the most vulnerable, and that means the most violent. In El Salvador, there is a security plan, and 50 municipalities are mentioned as the most violent in the country. We also are implementing the project where MCC has its focus, and we were asked to include municipalities that will also be implemented under the MCC work. So what we do is in those 15 municipalities, well, we started on 8 and we're growing this year to the 15. We have 3 different activities that we do for recruitment. Once the recruitment activity is advertised, whether it's through the municipality, the community centers, the church groups, the training center, or us on our own, we interview each youth. We have them complete psychometric tests for enrollment in the project, and they also complete an enrollment form, which is actually a registry that the country has called the Unique Participant Registry, and translating from Spanish, we call it the RUP. And in the RUP, we identify all of the different demographics of the youth, where they live, in their homes, their family income, their education level, to look at their eligibility for the project. And those are our 3 pieces of recruitment activities, and it determines their eligibility to continue in the project.
Great, thank you. And Lisa, and in terms of the technical skills that the participants are acquiring, are they exposed to the technical skills needed for all 4 sectors, or those skills or they acquire those skills depending on what is growing or what is in high demand in the different areas that Puentes is working?
It depends on the interest of the youth, but it also depends on the training that is available where they live. So we do not move youth around the country unless they have a way of doing that. So if there's a young person who lives in a community and the only training centers available to them are in IT and perhaps in bartending, just to throw out some examples, then those are the training programs that youth would be enrolled in. We don't move them around the country. Even though it's a small country, transportation is quite challenging, quite dangerous, and also the expenses involved for that. So there are daily transportation costs at times for the youth to go even to a nearby training center, but they are limited to what's near them. The training programs themselves the curricula is designed by the training centers. One of the things that I didn't talk about is our work with the training centers to improve their curricula, to improve their teacher training and also to improve their facilities. That's something that Puentes is also working on. But depending on the area that the youth selects, that would be the technical training that they received, and together with the life skills program that's implemented in every single technical training program that we have.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have just last question too for you, Lisa, before we open the for general Q&A. Could you also talk a little bit more about the self-employment entrepreneurship component that you mentioned, please?
Sure. Right now, we only just started that component. Puentes, I neglected to mention that Puentes works through grants. So we provide grants to training institutions for the technical training and the life skills training that I mentioned, and that helps us to strengthen the training institutions. And right now, we are also opening a grant for local institutions to provide the entrepreneurship training. We've done a few training programs so far with entrepreneurships to help the youth design and create their ideas, to progress from having their idea in our head to getting it established into something more formal. But at this point, we've only had about 100 youth go through that circuit training so far, and we've had 2 competitions for seed capital, and we awarded that to some of the youth, actually the ones that you see right in front of you with this little book company. But that's something that we're working on in the 3rd year of the project.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for a great presentation, Lisa. And as I said before, we are going to use the next 10 to 15 minutes that we have left for general Q&A. And we had received a few questions while you guys were presenting. The first one is addressed to Angela and Kristen. Can you guys talk more about how we can improve youth engagement in the front end design, which you mentioned in the challenges? And can you also talk a bit more about what is needed specifically to do this? Maybe mention the Youth Compass tool and how this could be a resource.
Yeah. Okay. So let me take that then. I think one of the issues we often have is that by the time the implementing partner gets to the project has been designed, and particularly in YouthPower where it's a contract, so we don't have as much flexibility to say, we want to go back and look at what is it the youth want. And so if a project hasn't done that design, that youth engagement before it's designed, it's harder for us to go in and create those kind of flexible mechanisms that provide those youth-led, those youth initiatives. One of the things that we've done under YouthPower Action is developed a post-award youth assessment tool called Compass. It has been piloted in 2 countries, in Indonesia and Jordan, and we are currently in the process of making those revisions. The group that's leading that work, and it will be ready by the end of October. And we will be, my colleagues will be training on that at the Youth Economic Opportunity Summit next week for those of you who can attend that session next Wednesday morning. But that the Compass walks people through a process of looking at their project design and steps and questions to go through to determine, are we looking at the full youth system? Are we looking at the types of positive youth development opportunities that are out there? Are we looking at opportunities for cross-sectoral leveraging with different sectors and institutions? So it walks you through a process of reflection on your own project design and helps you think about areas where you need to strengthen your own project. And ideally, you would do that with youth engagement. So that's one step when you get to the post-award process, but ideally that youth engagement happens before, and that we leave enough flexibility when we do youth engagement within project implementation that there's room for youth initiative. So that's part of the design itself, provides that flexibility.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. And Angela, there is a question for you too. Can you also please tell us a little bit more of how did you guys recruit the OVCs and what kind of incentive did you give them to stay in the project? Did we lose Angela?
Hello? Oh, sorry, it was still on the mute. So I was saying, for recruiting the OVC, we're using the selection criteria defined by the Ministry of Social Welfare, where because we are working with vulnerable children, and most of them are either coming from parents who were infected or affected by HIV. So we're using the criteria that were previously defined by our Ministry of Social Welfare. We also ensure that after selecting them, in the phase 1 we select them, and then after selecting them we do home visits with one social worker from the Ministry of Social Welfare, who will at last confirm that particular child or youth is really vulnerable. And in the second phase, we also do the selection using the criteria, but they also have to go through a written test. They have to write a test on mathematics and Portuguese. Portuguese because it is the official language that we use in Mozambique. So they go through that test, and based off the results of the test, then after they get the test results, we also do home visits to ensure that we are recruiting vulnerable children. So those are the criteria that we use in country. I don't know if I answered your question.
And I actually have a follow-up question. Did you have or have you seen a difference in working with orphans and other vulnerable youth? And if you have also experienced any difference between boys and girls?
Well, there's no much difference between orphans and vulnerable children, but with boys and girls, yes, we see that the girls are more committed, and during the classroom sections, they interact more with the facilitators. They are more committed to the community work, and overall, when we go to the employment sector, we find that there are more girls being employed compared to girls. And I think girls in general, they are more committed to the program, and they really make sure that they show this belonging to the program.
Okay.
Yeah, that in terms of when we look at the education statistics, in general, there's a significant gap between boys and girls in terms of secondary completion, but with our program there was a very small, in terms of boys and girls,
higher.
Boys have higher completion in the population at large. We've detected a small difference of more boys than girls reaching secondary completion, but it was quite small and smaller than the general population.
Okay, great, thank you. And just also as a follow-up question for you two, have you tried to integrate sexual and reproductive health
Yes,
issues?
absolutely, absolutely. It's part of the curriculum for Phase 2 for Programa para Futuro, and it was part of the life skills curriculum in Phase 1. And we have substantially lower rates of childbirth from young people in the program, and we've been tracking them over a period of years. So much lower than rates of childbirth for young people at large.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Lisa, we have a question for you. Can you please clarify the type of employment that you are tracking and how you are, what kind of indicator and how you are treating self-employment, in terms of tracking that? Oh, Lisa, you need to unmute your computer.
I'm not muted.
Okay, now you're fine.
I'm not. I'm not muted. Anyway, our indicator says that we track new and better employment. For the most part, however, the majority of our youth are not working at all, and if they are working, it's in non-formal jobs, domestic positions, for example, or temporary activities, and that doesn't count for the project. We count formal employment, long-term, full-time only, and that is what was required of us for the project. And so the jobs that the youth are obtaining are in technical fields. So, for example, we have non-university level requirements. The majority of the training courses itself that we have are certified, so that a youth can be a certified programmer upon completion of a course and can be hired by an IT programming company. Another course that we have is in hotel bartending, hotel waiting, and the courses will certify the youth, and then they go right into one of the new hotels, for example, to begin work. Other examples of jobs, we have youth that are working for a sugar plant, and non-traditional, because these are women. We also have young women and men who are working in plastics manufacturing, and they've been trained specifically to operate machinery and to complete the other technical jobs that are required by those companies. Our jobs are not designed by Puentes, but we work with the private sector to be sure that they are looking at the qualifications of youth and even changing some of the qualifications that their advertisements have. For example, we have businesses that will say they want a person to begin and to have between 25 and 30 years of age, but to have 15 years of job experience. And so we know that those are unrealistic requirements, and so we're working with the businesses so they can have their qualifications meet the skills that are actually required for the job.
Thank you, Lisa. We have another question. How many youth are in the programs right now, and what kind of system have you implemented to track the youth after they gain employment?
The goal of the project is to train 20,000 youth. We often receive criticism for that number because we are a large project, but I would say that the focus of the project is on the 20,000 that we're training now, but the overall focus of the project is to leave a system that's working in the country so that after Puentes is gone, the training centers are improved, there's a better opportunities and a better environment for the young people here. How do we track the youth? The training centers are actually the ones that are required to do the tracking. Again, because if we do it when we leave, there will not be anyone in place to do that. So our training centers, who we're not looking at anyone who graduated their programs, are now required by us under their grants, and hopefully they will continue to follow up with the youth, to know where they've gone, to know where they are working, and at least for 1 year out. It's not as in other countries where I've worked, and specifically, as you know, in the United States, it's a marketing tool for training centers and universities to show how many of their graduates are employed. that hasn't been done here. And so we are working with the training centers so that they recognize that this is something that would enhance their enrollment, and working with the training centers on their systems to make this happen. We are using a CRM in the project. We just began training the training centers on how to use it, and then we will be turning that over to a national institution for training, which is INSAFORP, which is a pseudo-government entity, and the training centers are certified and registered by INSAFORP so that they can all hopefully keep better track of where their graduates are going and what happens to them in the future.
Great. Thank you. And Lisa, can you also tell us a little bit more about the relationship between employers and those training centers, and what have been their perception, and if you have seen a positive change in terms of their perception from the employers?
It's still relatively new for us. The changes don't happen that fast. In order to get a grant with Puentes, the training centers are actually required to establish a relationship with businesses. And that's completely new for them. They've never done that before. So, as I said before, we want our graduates to be trained in a skill that a company wants. And so if a company knows that X training center is going to train the youth in the skills that they need for employment in this particular company, it would help the companies recruit their staff directly from these training centers. I would say that in terms of the feedback that we have gotten from the companies, it's mixed. They still have not gotten over their complete negative impressions of youth. They're still nervous about hiring young people from the communities that we work in. Some of them have been successful, and some of them have not. And when we follow up with the youth and we follow up with the businesses, we see that some of the old stigma are still in place. The youth still need to practice their life skills, still need to practice their work skills, and the employers need to treat the young people better. And so the relationship is still developing, I would say.
Lisa, a kind of a follow-up question. This is Maria. Has there ever been any thought about perhaps creating a different kind of ID that doesn't have the address of these communities on there? And I'm not sure if that would be a solution, but I know that you said...
Actually, yes. Actually, our youth have their own ID, the project ID with a photograph. We started the photograph a number of months ago because of security. We found that during our recruitment activities, the young people who don't want their picture taken are perhaps the youth that are involved in criminal activities and stay away from our recruitment activities when they find out that their picture will be taken. So yes, the youth do have IDs for the project, but an employer requires the address of a young person, of all their employees. So they must provide their address to get employment so that they're registered in the Social Security system, they're registered for health benefits of the government, they have their taxes taken out, etc. So for the project, yes, but also they're required for employment. But remember that we only work in the municipalities that are the most dangerous. So it's pretty well known that our 15 municipalities are the most violent.
Great.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to thank our presenters, Lisa, Angela, and Christy, for a great presentation today. We are gonna make this slide and presentation available to you within, I guess, couple weeks, next week. And I encourage you also to visit the YouthPower website, where we will post these resources, and also you can find additional resources related to all the work that YouthPower is doing. I also want to thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next webinar, which is scheduled for
Probably
October. So, yeah, check your inboxes, and we will send you the information once we have a final date. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.